for the first few, since I did wear them and I could hear myself so well in real time, I tended to go really close to the mic and just speak very like I was on the NPR or something.
Yeah.
Or like I would have no diaphragm support, and it was just really up here, just a very thin production of my voice.
So I'm going to try just talking like this. Does that sound okay? There we go. Okay.
And I don't know.
I do a podcast too, so I'm always playing around with my voice. And
although I think you use a condenser microphone.
Me?
So
do I? Well, I either use that snowball.
Yeah.
Or if I don't have the snowball with me, I actually just use the microphone that's on my laptop.
Oh, okay.
Why, you could tell?
Well, the thing is, the microphones I have right now here are dynamic microphones, so they're very directional, and you do have to get up in there in order to pick up whatever you intend.
Mm-hmm.
Condenser microphones are like they're the closest thing to, say, the human ear, what it captures.
Yeah.
And so these things on this device here, these microphones that are attached to this device, they're condenser microphones. So if I set up the microphone like all the way in the corner of this room, and I went to the opposite corner and I tapped on the wall, you can hear the tap on the wall as a human with ears from across the room. And so the condenser mic will definitely pick that up.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's what I do.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. I'm ready. Right. I just have this open because there's just like two things that I definitely want to say that I don't want to forget. Is that okay?
Sure.
I won't even tell you what they're about. But if I forgot it, then I would be like, oh, darn.
Okay. And I'm going to turn off my phone. And I tend to, because I'm paranoid about not getting the right levels for myself, I always try to like get as close to the table as possible.
Okay. I don't think I can get any closer.
I think you're fine there. You're fine there. As long as sometimes people, just because they're not used to like talking to a microphone, they tend to like,
Okay, I'll just try to stay right here.
But how you been? What's been going on?
Just, I have two boys at home. Neither one have a driver's license. So, yeah.
Wait,
so you can imagine.
How old are they?
One's 17 and one is 15. So one of them just finished driver's ed, and the other one wants his permit like as soon as he's 16. Mm-hmm. But the older one has a job lifeguarding. So it just makes it, and the other one volunteers for ambulance, fire, everything. So it's, I'm like a taxi cab this summer, basically. That's the best way to explain it.
Is your husband not available?
No, he is, and he's actually doing it today.
No,
even though he has to work. He has, we have to kind of adjust our schedules to there. Yeah.
So I'm taking you away from valuable time with your children.
No, I actually told them to please sleep in today if you could, because sometimes they don't. But I don't know. Are you going to ask me questions about my kids on here?
What?
Are you going to ask me? Did we start?
What? Oh yeah, we started. But
no, we did. Did we start?
Yeah. Yeah, we've been going for about 4 minutes.
Well, I didn't know we were starting. Can we start over?
No, the intended nature for my podcast is I'm just talking to people. I want it to be as casual as possible. It's not supposed to be a very official, formal interview kind of thing. You know what I mean? And I mean, it's not like you divulged any sensitive information.
No, I didn't.
My social security number is... The way I usually want to start these things is like I'm just asking, like, hey, how you been doing? What's been going on? Mm-hmm. So to try to, or ask them if they like pickles, to ease them into the conversation.
Okay.
But what have you been doing, like work wise? Have you been, as a clinical associate professor of English here, do you do any like research over the summer to like write papers and stuff?
Okay, so that's a really good question. So a lot of what I do is considered professional productivity, And one thing that falls under that category happens to be my work that I do for the Connecticut Council of Teachers of English. Mm-hmm. We just had a board meeting the last day of July, and my work over the summer has really been focusing on mentoring teachers around Connecticut. And so we checked in about that. We have a mentoring committee that works hard, especially through all the urban school districts throughout Connecticut, mm-hmm. to really support ELA teachers. We just feel that they need so much support right now, and we have mentors, in every urban district helping them.
Right.
Yeah. So that's been a lot of my work this summer. Yeah.
And you do like professional development kind of things.
Yes,
and
exactly.
not necessarily like, say, the usual kind of professorship kind of work where you do research and write stuff to publish.
Right. Yeah. And so I haven't really been writing anything, but what I do is I put it in practice in the field.
Right.
And so one of the areas that I think that I do and that we've talked about before is teacher resilience. Mm-hmm. And so I'm introducing 2 courses this fall at University of Hartford, mm-hmm. one for first-year students in the College of Arts and Sciences called the Resilience Project.
Right.
And the other one is a 1-credit class that's opened up to anyone at the university who would like to take it. And that's a resilience course as well. So a lot of my research that I actually do and then put into practice has been revolving around resilience and the idea of what is resilience. You
have your own podcast called
The Teacher Resilience Project.
The Resilient Teacher Project. Yeah. You don't know your own show. The Resilient Teacher Project, where it's like a on-the-go kind of professional development program to inspire and empower teachers who to offer skills that can help them with their jobs and also deal with the repercussions of being, say, a public school teacher. Yeah, that's really great. That's a great explanation of it. And I started that because I realized that a lot of the teachers who come out of the teacher prep programs, they know the content inside and out. So that's not a problem at all. It's really when they get to their first public school job, it's the idea of creating a classroom that is kind and compassionate and building trust with their students and just creating that classroom climate where learning can really happen. And that's the part that if you're not practicing it yourself, you're not able to model that for your students. So we talk a lot about how to actually fill up your cup to overflowing so that you have something to give. I mean, let's face it, teachers are really caretakers too. Yeah. And we have lots of students to care for every day. Mm-hmm. So if we're not filled to capacity, then there's no way that we're going to be able to, even impact student achievement. Yeah. So it's kind of like that. You have to help yourself before you can begin to help others. Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's true for anyone in any profession. But for teachers, it's definitely that way because the students are like sponges and they're looking at you and they want to see how you react to certain situations, how you respond. And so they'll take that to heart. And so we need to do the inner work so that we can almost like pass that on to our students. Right. How long have you been doing the podcast? So I did it for 1 year and I'm coming back. I took a break over the summer and I'm coming back this year. I feel more focused than ever to really, dive right in at the beginning to foundational self-care because a lot of people think self-care is all about, getting that mani or pedi or getting a massage. And it's really so much deeper than that. And so that's where I'd like to start this year. Okay. Do you have any interesting guests lined up for the podcast? Or I should preface this with, you don't always have guests on the podcast. Most of them are kind of a solo thing where you're you have a particular topic and you're just pontificating about that.
Right.
And then sometimes you do have guests on. Do you have any interesting guests planned for the fall?
Yes, I do. Actually, what I decided to do for this school year is to really mine the wisdom of current teachers. And so instead of just me talking, I'm going to be having conversations with current teachers in the field. I did that a little bit at the beginning. And then from there, I was learning so much about resilience and self-care that I wanted to share it. And so I did that. And now I'm turning back towards having these conversations with teachers, because I presented with one teacher at the end of this last school year, Joanne Mumley from Wolcott Public Schools. And I just had an epiphany during our presentation, because I used to be, a public school teacher. So I got it and I was there, but she's in it now. And I need to be talking to people who are in it now. And so that's my goal for this year.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Where are you from exactly?
So I'm originally from Waterbury, Connecticut.
Okay.
And then from a very young age, my family moved to Naples, Florida. So I grew up in Florida.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you pretty much did all your growing up in Florida?
Pretty much. I mean, from first grade all the way through 8th grade. And then I decided to abandon my family and move back to Connecticut. And so I lived with my grandmother.
Okay. And
I went to high school in Connecticut. Naples, Florida in the 1970s, early 80s, there was really nothing much going on. Now it's overpopulated, but at the time, growing up, I had alligators outside our front door, panthers, just wild country, right near the Everglades. So yeah, it was interesting.
So the reasoning behind you abandoning Florida was it, you thought Florida was A, dangerous, and B, boring?
Well, I thought at the time, I thought it was interesting that I was, in this area. Being an only child, though, I was just there with my parents.
Oh.
And so I didn't have, siblings around to really experience this with. I had all of my cousins back in Connecticut. But actually, there was a pivotal moment that created this opportunity for me. And my parents and I decided to come up to Connecticut for the summer right before I started high school. And my grandparents left for a trip to Las Vegas. And my grandfather had a massive heart attack during that trip, and he passed away in Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. And so we decided that we were going to stay with my grandmother. And so it was just very temporary that I was going to start at Holy Cross High School in Waterbury. And I was going to stay there for a few months. And then after that, I was going to come back to Florida with my parents, and just seeing the opportunities that were available to me at this high school, being around cousins again, old friends, family. It was just, it was wonderful. And so I lived with my grandmother, and I saw my parents regularly, but not all the time.
Okay.
And so for 4 years, I decided to, do that, stay with my grandmother. And then I just kept living life from there and never returned full time to Florida.
Okay.
Yeah.
What did you do at Holy Cross High School? Were you involved in sports? Did you read a lot, or?
Yeah, I read a lot. It's hard to maybe describe, but so living with my grandmother, I'm from an Italian American family.
Okay.
And she lived in the Italian section of Waterbury. So I was surrounded by family all the time. So a lot of what I did revolved around my family life, dinners, parties, just everything like that. Plus, I guess I was well-rounded. I did some running. I did cross country, and I read a lot. And I knew from 7th grade, actually, when I was still a student in Florida, I won an English award. And it was that year that I knew that I wanted to become an English teacher. So, I kept up the reading while I was at Holy Cross, and I was always an avid reader, and just loved to talk about books.
What kind of stuff were you reading?
Gravitate towards people who would, want to talk about books. So just really at the time, looking back, it was really the classics, which I didn't really think about at the time that's what I was reading. But I read The Hobbit.
Okay.
I read The Diary of Anne Frank. I read, Huck Finn. Mm-hmm. I loved a lot of what I read, but I would say it was the classics. I didn't really realize when I was younger than high school. I read Lois Lowry or Judy Blume, Stephen King. But I think in high school, I read the classics, which really got me excited about becoming an English teacher. I think I was going in that direction because remember I was an only child, but I liked to pretend. Mm-hmm. And so I would pretend that I was an English teacher long before I really was, okay? And so in order to do that, I felt like I needed to be knowledgeable about Shakespeare. I had an old book of all of his plays. I went to Europe when I was very young with my mom and my grandparents. And when I came home, even though I was young, I would read those plays. Mm-hmm. So those were ingrained in me from a young age. Yeah.
Where did you go for undergrad?
So I went to Assumption College in Worcester, Massachusetts, very small Catholic college, very much in line with the high school where I was. It was a large high school, but still Catholic. Mm-hmm. Very much pushed into a Catholic upbringing. And so I ended up going to college with many of my high school friends. So it was a very easy transition. Mm-hmm. They had English secondary education. So I gravitated towards that immediately, became an English major, and I started, just smiling about my student teaching days because I loved it. Mm-hmm. Worcester is a large city, and I was at Burncoat High School, urban school, and I think that's when I fell in love with urban teaching, and I knew that's what I wanted to do.
Okay. I think there's a guy named Peter Clementi who is a instructor of guitar here at the University of Hartford, mm-hmm. who I think his main-ish gig is teaching at Assumption College.
Oh, wow. I had no idea.
Have you ever met him? Or
no, and my son actually does the Hart Community Division for percussion.
Okay.
Is he in that building?
In the art school, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll be taking a course in guitar with him later this fall.
Nice. I think I knew you were interested in guitar.
As my academic advisor, I think you should. It's probably your job to know that I'm minoring in music.
Oh yeah, I know that, but I didn't know guitar specifically. That you're interested in guitar.
I would say that is my primary instrument.
Okay.
So,
and what other instruments do you like?
I play piano a bit, mm-hmm. and have a collection of things that it looks really impressive when you look at my room full of instruments. But it doesn't take a lot to play an egg shaker. Or a tambourine, but a smattering of percussion instruments like egg shakers, tambourine, or glockenspiel, or a set of bongos, harmonica.
To me, that's fun. Yeah, those are fun instruments.
Yeah, or do you know what a melodica is?
No.
It's kind of like a harmonica crossed with a keyboard, where it looks. So if you looked at it, it just looks like a small keyboard.
Okay.
But the thing is, you take a tube and attach it to the end, and you blow into it, and then you press down on the keys, let the air pass through for it to sound, and it sounds. The timbre is similar to a harmonica.
And you play that too?
Yeah, sure. You could say, yeah.
Nice.
Although I think most of my time is invested in, guitar and piano.
Okay. So you have a lot of interests too.
You could say.
Yeah.
Being that I'm double majoring in film and English.
Yeah. It's hard to really narrow it down.
Yeah.
I feel like we're similar in that way.
Don't you, you teach yoga or something, right?
So I'm a yoga teacher. I went to Kripalu, which is a yoga center in the Berkshires of Massachusetts, in Stockbridge and Lenox. And they're known for a compassionate type of hatha yoga. And so I became a 200-hour teacher in 2013. And so, I practice yoga. I taught yoga for a few years, and now I'm trying to get back into that.
So like every weekend, you're just like going up to Massachusetts to teach yoga at this one place?
Well, no, when I was a student, I would go up there and also to Fairfield, Connecticut. I would take classes in order to become a yoga teacher.
Okay.
When I taught yoga, I actually taught it at a really cool place called Woodbury Yoga, and that is in Woodbury, Connecticut. And also I taught at the Wisdom House, which is a beautiful place in Litchfield, Connecticut, which is a very quiet place for writers to go. And you can stay there indefinitely and just write. So it's just, I have so many romantic visions of this place. So I taught there for a while when I was teaching yoga. I also taught an interesting yoga class at my home, and I invited just an array of beautiful people.
Just inviting strangers into your home to do yoga.
I taught a woman many years ago when I taught English at a community college, and she has a son who's autistic. He's amazing. And I invited them over. And then I had another friend who had a young daughter at the time, and she's raising this daughter on her own. I invited them over. So I just found people who I really connected with, and I just had them over. You know, even a neighbor would come over. So every Wednesday night we did this for a while, and we'd have to move all of the living room furniture out of the way. And now I have
You don't have a spare room for yoga?
No, I didn't. And so now I have this amazing opportunity where we have 2 golden retrievers, and the younger one, Abby, ruined our sofa. So we removed it a few months ago, and now we haven't bought any furniture yet. So it's an empty room, and it's calling me to start another class. So we'll see what happens. But really, seriously, I do try to bring yoga into everything that I do. So into the program, as a professor, as a mentor. I just feel that so much of what I learned, it's just automatically within me. It's part of my skill set now. And
yeah,
so
I've noticed as
that.
part of your demeanor, it's just very kind of relaxed, laid back, kind of go with the flow, to the point where the class I took with you last semester, Literature for the Adolescent Reader, so it only met once a week. So that was like 2.5 hours worth of quote unquote class, but you rarely ever went to the full length because you knew like, oh, this is the week's worth of stuff. It's not going to take that long. And someone ordered pizza to the classroom and you were like, I don't care.
Towards the end of the semester. Yes. Yeah, because I want to bring you all together as a community, as a learning community. And one of the ways that I do that is by building trust immediately.
Right.
And that's what I try to model for all of you so that you do that in the classroom. So I feel at the beginning of a semester, I'm not really concerned about the content because you're going to read adolescent lit books on your own and we're going to talk about them. But I'm thinking of building trust, creating that safe space for discourse, and also just having that, like I talked to you about, that kind, compassionate, empathetic classroom where people can say what they wanted to say. And I think that we did that.
As a professor here at the University of Hartford, you teach English classes, but they're not really, like you don't teach an intro to lit class. It's more you're the program director for English secondary education. And so you teach more like this literature for adolescent reader and education-oriented courses to train undergraduates to be teachers in the field.
Yes.
And so lit for the adolescent reader, other stuff including, was it like effective teaching? What else? Yeah.
So first I just want to say that I love adolescent literature, and I love teaching that. So I hope that came through in the class.
Oh, it did.
That I'm enthusiastic about that. And I'm so grateful that I'm going to have the opportunity to teach these 2 classes this fall in resilience, because that's near and dear to my heart right now. It's a huge passion, but really what I'm here for and really why I come to work every day is for a class that I teach in the fall and in the spring for seniors. And that relates directly to student teaching. So in the fall, it's called practicum because the English students are only in the field 2 days a week. And then in the spring, they're there every day. So it's 14
It's
weeks.
proper like student teaching.
Yeah, it's the absolute, it's from, the minute your cooperating teacher gets there until the end of the school day. It's every single day for 14 weeks, Monday through Friday. And so my job really is to coach you through that process. There's a lot of growth that happens for a senior in this program from September to May. And so my primary job is to ensure that you're getting everything you need along the way to be successful, so that by the end of your student teaching, you're ready to do it. You're ready to apply for a job and go.
Right.
So the way that I find students in September of their senior year versus how I find them in May, there has to be a huge amount of growth there. And so that's my job. And that's the course that I teach is called Seminar. And I do it every semester. So we have math students who join us in the spring, but it's just the English students in the fall.
Okay. Do you think there's a particular course you teach that you would say is your favorite?
Well, I get to teach a course called Elements of Teaching Writing, and I love to teach writing to all of you because I've gone into many classrooms because before this I was an instructional coach and I would visit classrooms. And being in so many classrooms, I've noticed that ELA teachers love books. They love talking about books. They love, students who collaborate and get into groups and do all that. But there's not a lot of writing going on in the ELA classroom.
Right.
There's not a lot of daily writing going on. And so my philosophy is to write alongside your students. And so it's an interesting class because we get to talk about all these different ways that you can teach writing to your students. And then I tell the students at the end, when I'm your supervisor and I come in to observe you in student teaching, I want to see you teaching writing. I want to make sure that we are graduating students who teach writing because I just feel like that's not happening everywhere.
And in turn, graduating secondary students who know how to write.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. And so speaking of that, I also teach the English course, grammar. And that's going to be coming up too.
Contemporary English grammar. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Right? As a student majoring in English secondary education, part of the one of the concerns I have about, kids who are going through school these days is I find a lot of them do not know how to write. And so part of my mission statement as a prospective teacher would be to make sure kids are literate.
Yes.
Reading is very important, but equally important is the skill of just being able to write, to string a sentence together. In your experience teaching writing, do you think there's one particular point, one spot that is particularly difficult for people to grasp when it comes to learning about writing?
As far as being difficult, I find that it's more difficult for students to learn how to write if they're not readers.
Right.
So my whole idea of teaching writing, a lot of it, and I do, there's all different strategies, but my main strategy that I showed, students in multiple classes, so they're getting this all the time, is through mentor texts. And what that means is they have examples of what good writing looks like. Because I really believe that we're asking our students to write, but we're not giving them examples of good writing.
Right.
So for instance, if we want them to be able to write a strong introduction, I want to show them 5 strong introductions. And I want to talk about them, and I want to dissect them, and I want to answer questions about them. And I want them to really, get what it looks like to have this strong introduction, and then they can try. But without having those examples in front of them, I just don't think that it's realistic for our students to write today. Maybe because they're not reading as much in the traditional sense because of, more technology, and they're reading, but they're reading differently. And so I love the idea of giving them, here are some examples of, how to, integrate evidence into your paper, and just give them a bunch of that to read and collaborate and talk and really get it, and then try doing it.
When I think about writing and the dearth of learning about writing nowadays, I tend to think more about grammar, or the very basic mechanics of, say, structuring a sentence. Because I don't know if you think about it this way. So I read a lot growing up. I even read the dictionary quite a bit. And I would always try to dissect sentences to see where everything fit. I wouldn't say I quite understand the words antecedent or whatever, but I think I do know the underlying structure of how it all works. It's almost like me, I was originally majoring in a STEM field or something.
Right.
And I'm very math and science.
Yes, you are.
And very analytical and whatever. And I tend to look at English that way, where I look at when I'm writing a paper, it's my MO is trying to fit as much information as I can into a single sentence, to the point where you would see it might go on for a few lines and you think, that has to be a run-on sentence, right?
Right.
But the way I structure it, it's almost like figuring out a math problem to make sure everything fits together, is equal on both sides, where I'm trying to, I have to use, in order to make this thought connect to this thought, I have to use this word or a couple of words here that transitions or connects those points so that the whole sentence is not a big mess.
Right. I completely understand what you're saying. In fact, I loved algebra so much that I thought about being a math teacher. And then I took geometry and I thought, I'm not sure.
I had the same feeling.
So with that being said, though, I think that I understand what you're saying only because I look at sentences like that, and we could, diagram or dissect sentences to really see, and we do that in the grammar class. What are these words anyway that make up the sentence? But I tend to do that too. I see it as almost like an equation. And I think that's a good way to look at it. And that's one of the ways that we talk about it actually in the grammar class, because I know that will appeal to some of you, and that you'll understand that. And so sometimes by adding, prepositional phrases, some clauses, like you said, maybe it's not a run-on sentence because the way that it's structured, it works.
I think the very first time I ever became very aware of sentence structure was when I learned about using commas to isolate a parenthetical phrase or something like that.
Yeah.
Where,
and you realized it could be really long, but because the commas are there.
Yeah. And so if you removed everything between the commas, it would still work as a sentence.
Yeah, it still makes sense. Yeah. That's a pretty cool, idea the first time when the light bulb goes on.
Yeah. I find when I write, it tends to be, maybe you've noticed it in the things I've turned in. I try to, for some reason, I like to use a lot of line breaks where it's almost like I'm trying to convert thoughts into words on paper. And so it's me trying to emulate how people speak, the way you can have, like we're speaking now, where you can have little thoughts and tangents that come quickly right after one another. But because it happens rather quickly, it's not like they're separate sentences. And so I think part of my writing is me trying to find how to convey that kind of speech, where you have a thought, but then it's related, but it's rather incomplete, while you jump to another thought that as a better representation of what you were initially trying to go for with the words you were saying. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So I feel like, you know what, I think you're going to be taking grammar with me in the spring. And after having this conversation with you, I'm glad you're going to be in the class.
Yeah.
Because I can already tell you have so much to add.
Yeah. I'm also really glad that I happened to be at the university at a time where I will be taking contemporary English grammar with you, because I have a fascination with the modern construct of grammar and sentence structure that kind of, it's very rooted in the how you can jumble up the quote-unquote correct way to structure a sentence for comedy, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Where you can use like Pig Latin or apply a commutative property of words where like instead of saying go home, you're drunk, you can
flip that around.
Go drunk, you're home.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Right. Yeah. So I think we can, definitely play around with it. And remember, just because so many students who take the course too are going to be English teachers, I want to make sure that you feel confident in teaching grammar to other people as well, to your own students. Because as you know, in public education, sometimes teaching grammar is in. And then sometimes, we don't touch grammar. And then we see what happens when we do that. So I think it's going to be something that's really important for all of you. Hopefully all of these courses build on each other, and they're important components that when you have all of them together and you're doing your student teaching, right, I've got it. I can do this. I want to be an English teacher. Mm-hmm.
Did you ever venture into, say, creative writing? Like writing recreationally or teaching creative writing?
So as an English teacher, we do teach creative writing. But just to back up a little bit, when I was in college, I wrote a lot of poetry. I was features editor of the school newspaper at Assumption. So I love creative writing. When I talk about students, our K through 12 students, I believe that daily writing is necessary, and part of that can be creative writing. Okay, I know the Common Core talks about argumentative writing, informational writing, and narrative.
Yeah.
But there's a place for just creative writing, just writing for the sense of the love of writing. Just like, dance is creative and music is creative. Writing is so creative too. Mm-hmm. Yet we're always formalizing it. And, asking students to read these 3 articles and, pull out the evidence and write a paper. Yeah, I think it's important. I think a lot of students who might not be creative in other areas find that, wow, I'm creative in writing, or it doesn't always have to be dance or music. It can be, or theater. It can be cooking. I love to cook. And so I find that I'm creative cooking in the kitchen. So I think we all have to find what that is.
Are you saying you're going to write a cookbook? Or
actually, I've published 2 cookbooks.
Oh, really?
One of them was a long time ago. In 2005, I was home with my infant and toddler, which I wasn't used to being home because I was always teaching. Mm-hmm. And I decided to email at the time because I didn't have the internet. So I emailed community supported agriculture farms, CSA farms from all over the country. Mm-hmm. And I asked them for recipes, and I compiled all of these recipes into a cookbook that summer. And I had over 3,000 printed, and I sold all 3, I think it was 3,700 delivered to my garage. I thought my husband was going to kill me.
Wait, he didn't know about it?
Well, he knew, but when he saw...
Are you publishing cookbooks again?
When he saw the truck, which couldn't even fit on our street, he knew there was a problem. And so I just started selling them in boxes of 30. So I wasn't even taking them out of the boxes. I was just selling them back to the farms in boxes of 30. And then they were selling them to their members.
Right, okay.
And so that was a great experiment that I did when my kids were young. And then in 2011, I think it was, I published a small cookbook called Vegetable Bliss. Simple seed to table inspiration. Okay. And I did that because I love vegetables. I literally, I'm not kidding you. I love vegetables. I love growing them. I love going to the farm. I love going to,
Did this book come with a pocket for a CD in the cover of the Beach Boys song Vegetables?
No, it didn't. Maybe it should have. But no, this was the greatest hits of the first one that I did, because farms were, reaching out to me saying, well, are you going to do that again? Are you going to, and so this time it was more of my recipes, not theirs, although I did include some of theirs, and it was just all about veggies. It's the best way I can explain it. And I felt like there was a market for it because, when people join a farm for the first time, and they pick up their weekly share, that's a thing. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. CSA farms, community supported agriculture farms, they don't know what to do with the vegetables once they come home, because they're not just getting cucumbers and lettuce. They're getting vegetables maybe that they might be getting, like broccoli rabe, and other vegetables that they've never seen or used, or they know about them,
or not really used as mainstreamly as, say, like tomatoes, lettuce.
Yeah, it's not just all about like making a salad. It's how am I going to use all these veggies? I have kohlrabi. What am I going to do with it? And so that was the idea behind that cookbook, was just to help people figure out how to use all their veggies. And so I have a lot of ideas about that. And I always make sure that we use all of our veggies every week. Nothing goes to waste. In fact, anything that is going to be wasted either goes into a smoothie, it goes into a pesto, or it goes...
Or a stir fry.
Or a stir fry, yeah, or a tomato sauce. I will put everything in the food processor so my family can't even see it.
Or boil them, mash them, stick them in the stew.
Yes, and I will throw it in something. Cauliflower will go into the mashed potatoes. All undetected.
Speaking of things people wouldn't have expected you have done, you have a JD. You have a degree in law.
Yes, I do. And I'm a member of the Connecticut Bar Association. I have been since 2001. So it's coming up to 20 years. And so while I was a teacher, I went to law school at night. So I was working full-time during the day up until my last year. Then I took a little time off just so I can, there were a lot of courses towards the end that had to be taken during the day. At the beginning, it was more flexible and I was able to take evening classes. But as I was getting closer to graduation, I was writing papers and, just doing a lot more research. And so, I graduated in 2000 and I taught business law and legal environment of business for Capital Community College for a bunch of years, along with English courses, humanities courses, business communications, which kind of bridged the gap between the writing part of English and, the legal or the business part of it.
Right, okay.
So that was more of interdisciplinary.
All right. Now, maybe I'm just ignorant, but you said from a very young age you wanted to be an English teacher.
Yeah.
And so going from being an English teacher to earning a degree in law, which, 99% of the time when people get a degree in law, they plan to become a lawyer.
Right.
That seems like a very far and strange jump to me. Mm-hmm. What was the reason behind you wanting to go to law school and earn a JD?
At the time, so I'm trying to put myself into, I was early 20s, so trying to think back. And I loved teaching English. It wasn't anything to do with, not wanting to be a teacher. I knew that I'd always be a teacher in one way or another.
Okay.
It was more of just the intellectual challenge and knowing that I wanted to do an advanced degree. And if I were to do an advanced degree, what would it be? And I also at the time was fiercely independent and wanted to do something for myself that I knew that I would have forever and that I could always take care of myself. I wouldn't need anybody to help me or take care of me or anything. I just really wanted to be independent. What I didn't know is that while I was in law school, I ended up meeting my husband, who is an attorney to this day. And the thought of both of us practicing law while having children didn't really appeal to me.
Okay.
So I thought, this is great. I can keep, teaching. And so that's what I did. And so I think the older that I got, and now we got married. The next year we have our first son, then we have our second son right away. I think for me, it was knowing that I can do it and fall back on that anytime I wanted to. But at the same time, I was so excited about education, as I always have been. And so I kept going to school. So then I became a literacy specialist. Then I went back to school to become a principal. So a lot more schooling after that. So I think what I realized as a reflection is that I'm a lifelong learner. And that's why I became a yoga teacher. And that's why I even did some energy healing. I'm a Reiki master. So I went to school for that. I published the cookbooks. All in all, there's so many things that I love. I don't know if I should save the world or savor the world. I think that's a part of a quote from E.B. White. The whole idea is that I love to learn. And so I feel that going through law school, yes, it was challenging, but I loved every minute of it. I loved the reading. I loved the questioning. I loved the intellectual experience. And then for years, like I said, I taught some law courses, and I loved having those conversations with students and to introduce them, to business law for the very first time, and to encourage them, if they wanted to go on that path towards law school, if that was right for them.
Does that mean you always had an interest in law?
I think the interest in law came through a writing course that I took in college. And it was just a persuasive writing course, but I really loved it. And I loved the professor, and it just opened some doors for me. And I took a business. What's so funny is there's no electives when you do English secondary education. There's so many courses, but I had,
yes, I'm aware.
Yeah. But I had 3 credits. I had one elective that I that I could take, and I took business law.
Oh, okay.
And so I'm like, wow, this is a whole other, area that I could explore. And so then I had to make those decisions, because it's not just, I'm going to go to law school. I had to figure out how I was going to do that. Like I said, teaching was my number one. So I continued to teach as long as I could. And now, sometimes I just get so fired up about something like the environment. And I think
that you really just want to prosecute people. And
and sometimes I'm just, when am I going to move to the next thing? But I love this so much, and that's why I do it. And as we're talking about this, you can see that, now I'm bringing in resilience. Now I'm talking about teacher self-care. I mean, there's always something new. Mm-hmm. So it's not like I'm doing the same thing every year. Even the courses that I teach are never the same every year. I mean, part of the reason why I do the adolescent lit course like I do is because I feel that students need choice. So if I don't give you choice in the adolescent lit course, but I'm telling you that our high school students need choice in our ELA courses, then that wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah. And you went to law school at the Western New England University, right?
Yes. In Springfield, Massachusetts. So I would drive up to carpool with some people up to Springfield. And then, I still lived in Connecticut.
And how was that? That
was a lot. I don't know how I did it. I think one of the ways that I approach life is to keep your eye on the prize. So I keep my eye on what it is that I want to do, my goal. And so that was a goal. And I knew that I had 4 years of doing this while working. It's not going to be easy, but it was my goal. And this wasn't a program where you could miss any of the classes. I mean, right. I had to be there all the time. And it's not a program where you can sit there without reading. Everything, I was probably terrified my first year because there's so much reading and there's so much discourse in the classroom and there's so many expectations. But then once you, just like anything, once you feel a little more comfortable and feel like I've got this, and then it became more exciting and I started looking at, started focusing on education law, started focusing on a case that was happening in Connecticut at the time, Sheff versus O'Neill, which changed some of the way we look at education in Hartford and in other cities. And I'm so passionate about that even my own boys went for a few years to a Hartford public school, a magnet school, because I wholeheartedly believe in those magnet schools.
Right, okay.
And I think that, you'll have an opportunity, and I love for the students in our program to be placed in a magnet school for at least a semester just so they can get the idea of what that's like, because it's students from Hartford and then also students coming from 30 towns from around Hartford.
Right.
So that's a lot of diversity, bringing a lot of different people together. I love that.
With all these things you do, such as teaching, knowing about law, yoga, secretly publishing cookbooks, do you have a thing planned to learn about? What's the next big thing do you think you're going to pick up in the foreseeable future?
That's a really good question. Right now, I feel called.
I feel like last year it was the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to continue with the podcast, and I want to create some of the things, that I do regularly that have longevity, because I think that's important too. And I think the podcast is certainly one of them, because the direction that I'm going in now really is about mentoring teachers and supporting teachers on this journey and really looking at a classroom maybe in a different way as this learning community, this group of people who are together where, as I said, it's more of compassion over content. So for someone, you have to understand, for years, I was just focused on the content. I mean, even when I came here on my interviewing, it was all about culturally responsive literature and disrupting texts and bringing more choice into the classroom and still embracing the canon, but having that balance. And it was all about that. Now I feel like I'm really moving in a direction where I look in the classrooms and I know that teachers need support, that they need to take care of themselves, that they need to do the inner work. And it just so happens that through my yoga practice, and through all the research I do on resilience, that I feel like I'm at a perfect place right now to bring that to teachers, either through writing. So this year I foresee myself doing some writing in that area, and also through giving talks and hosting workshops, either on my own or through the Connecticut Council of Teachers of English, because they're very interested in that too. We know that this is a critical time when teachers need support more than ever. And it's not, we used to think that after year 3, a teacher would decide, oh, this isn't for me, I'm leaving. But now we realize it's more like year 7. And so maybe they can get through 7 years, but now they don't feel supported in year 7. And so they don't know where to go from there. And some teachers, they want to do something different. They want to stay in education, but maybe like I did, they want to become a literacy specialist or a coach or, an assistant principal. And so we want to make those opportunities a little bit easier for them to grasp and have that support as they make those transitions too. Because I feel like we're all always growing and changing. And to expect a teacher to start in year 1 and stay the same, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. Maybe the next big thing you do will be publishing a cookbook of recipes that promote resilience in teachers. And it'll be half cookbook, half like articles you've written about resilience in the classroom and what could be done to promote that.
Oh, I feel like you're a mind reader, because I've actually thought about that. Because part of what I talk about in foundational self-care is food. And now that you know that I'm a foodie, I mean, it's really difficult for me to even visit a student teacher, a teacher candidate in the field, and notice that they don't have any healthy foods with them. They don't even have a water bottle. They're probably dehydrated. I mean, this is, maybe not every supervisor's looking at this, but for me, this is like a red flag. This is, I get very concerned when they're not taking care of themselves. And so that's something that we talk about in seminar all the time. So I definitely think that this is interconnected, that the inner work that I'm talking about has to come first from a foundational level, because if we're not getting the proper hydration, the proper nutrition, the sleep that we all need so desperately to get up so early to, be on by 7 a.m. as a teacher. There's so many different aspects. So really the first question is, how are you taking care of yourself? And then, or how are you being kind to yourself? Because a lot of times we're saying yes way too much when it needs to be no, because we need to set boundaries and maintain those boundaries. There's so much that goes into taking care of ourselves. And there's so much that new teachers need to understand as far as how to be their best. How can I show up being my best? So yes, I want to focus on that this year for all of you and for those who are already in the field.
Maybe this book should be like one part cookbook, one part yoga instruction, another part research literature on teacher resilience, and another part on like the legal underpinnings.
That's so funny, because I don't think anyone else would write that. So I think that's available for me. Yeah, definitely. And the
yoga law cookbook for teachers.
Yeah. And actually, as we're talking about this, I'm thinking about how important it is for teachers to feel supported. And so just part of that too, Benson, I think, is just, if they're with the students all day long, but if they have like 15 minutes without them, how great it would be for them to even be able to do some standing posture, some breathing, right. So something like that just seems really, when I look at it, if I had to boil it down to just like a small phrase, it's all stress reduction. Mm-hmm. It's how can we reduce teacher stress so that they could be at their best for their students.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you for, having some insights about that.
Well, most of them were me trying to set up jokes, but they turned into insights. So.
Yeah.
Well, I think, I guess that's it. We're like an hour.
Really? It seems like we just started.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah. This was fun.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me on your show, and I look forward to...
My show. It's my show.
And I look forward to listening to all of them.
Cool. All right, we're out.